there, you're listening to Tales from the Ridge. If you enjoy this podcast, it would mean so much to me if you could subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to it on and give it a rating. And tell a friend. We're really trying to grow our listener base, and the only way we can really do that is by word of mouth, so it means a lot to have listeners spread the good word. So without further ado, here is Season 2, Episode 3. Legends of the Arcadia Rim.
I'm the only soul what's been beyond those rings of death, hissed the drunk old man slouched over the bar at the Last Stop Saloon in Station Gamma. Now, Tex, that don't make any goddamn sense, said Cash Guthrie, tipping her shot glass over with a slam. You just told me there's a whole civilization living in the atmosphere off Arcadia, but now you're the only one that's been beyond the rings? No, said Tex with a hiccup. No. His head lolled a bit to one side. I mean, I'm the only one that's seen it and returned. He emphasized the last word by slurring its syllables together. Why am I supposed to believe any of this? Cash asked with a snort through her nose as Tex's watery eyes tried to meet hers. Because... He leaned close to Cash for emphasis, the booze on his breath creating a bridge between them. I have this. Tex patted the outside of his ragged bomber jacket. What? Cash asked. Tex fished around in his coat pocket and withdrew a small piece of plexiglass. Cash took it from his outstretched fingers. The glass held a random string of numbers, but she had been flying this galaxy long enough to know what they were. Coordinates? Cash looked up into Tex's face as he leaned heavily against the bar. A treasure map, said Tex, with a smile that exposed 3 gold teeth and 1 missing one. His face went serious for a moment. Take it. Tex, I want you to have it, he said, almost too loudly. If anyone can find it, it's Cash Guthrie. I'm too old for adventure anymore. What kind of treasure are we talking about? Cash asked, her eyes narrowing. Enough to set you and your crew up for an entire year, said Tex, waving the bartender down for another drink. Cash stared at the small piece of plexiglass for a moment longer, and then slipped it into the inner pocket of her duster. Well, I owe you one, Tex, said Cash as she paid for his round. Don't worry about that until you come back alive, said the old man with a sloppy wink. Cash chuckled and stood from the bar, leaving her tab and a generous tip behind. She slapped Tex on the back, practically pushing him from his stool, and then moved back into the hallway outside the saloon. The buzz of Station Gamma greeted her. Without a second thought, Cash made her way to the docks, where the Horizon was waiting for her. The glass elevators that ran up and down the station crawled by, sentience of every variety pouring from their doors as they opened and shut with a low hiss. Cash finally snagged one going down, squeezing in next to a Therian who couldn't quite decide on what shape they wanted to occupy. The elevator whirred downward, and Cash braced herself against the glass wall as the Jontar behind her gave a grunt. The air in the elevator grew thick, and then finally, the motion stopped. The doors opened, vomiting them up onto the bottom floor of the station. Cash strode out quickly, moving toward the end of the rows of ships, their gangplanks suctioned to the side of the station like leeches. Boone McCreary stood outside of the horizon. She could smell the heady clove of his cigarette from here. "Hey, boss," he said casually, standing up straight as she approached. "Is everyone inside?" Cash asked. "I think so. Why?" "I've got some news," said Cash as she spun the correct sequence of numbers into the brass dial outside the door. There was a soft beep and a whoosh as the door swung open. Cash motioned with her head for Boone to follow, and the man snuffed out his cigarette beneath his boot heel. A muted conversation came from the shared space that occupied the center of the horizon. Inside, June and Barker were seated at a circular table. Tack sat off-center, her thick legs crisscrossed beneath her as she meditated. "You're back early. Must have been a slow night," said June as she caught her sister's gaze. "Not quite," Cash said, leaning against the round archway as Boone took a seat at the table. "Something on mind?" Tack asked, her wide eyes opening slowly like window shades, their nictating membrane winking at Cash. "I met an old-timer at last stop. Retired smuggler." Cash pulled the plexiglass from her pocket. "He gave me this." "What is it?" asked June, wrinkling her nose. "A treasure map." "Sick," said June, with a clap of her hands. Cash raised one hand to stifle her sister's enthusiasm. "A treasure map to the Arcadia Rim." All the excitement fizzled out of the air immediately. "Now, I know you ain't got a lick of sense in you, but the Arcadia Rim? Even for us, Cash, that's bold." June finally broke the tense silence. "Tex said we'd be set up for a year," Cash added casually, lighting up a cigar, letting her eyes move slowly around the room as she puffed on it. Every set of eyes glanced about, wondering what the others might be thinking. "Well, we're all going to meet our maker eventually. Might as well be in the pursuit of enough bars to take a sabbatical," said Barker, propping his feet up on the table. "I have no fear," said Tack simply. June sighed deeply. "Fine. That's the spirit," said Cash, straightening up. "Now, go pop in these coordinates." June stood quickly and snapped the plexiglass from her sister's hand. Her boots thumped loudly against the floor as she strode to the cockpit, her head of thick black curls bouncing. Cash followed as Barker and Boone began to chat, Tack returning to her torpor-like meditations. Inside the cockpit, June was already seated in the pilot's seat, her hands busily moving over the dials and lights of the switchboard before her. "Don't be mad," said Cash, slouching down into the co-pilot chair. "I ain't mad," said June unconvincingly. "Why are you so worried?" Cash asked, puffing a ring of smoke from her lips. "I ain't worried," said June through gritted teeth. "Then what's got your panties in a bunch?" Cash interrogated casually. "I don't think you appreciate what kind of danger we're about to go into," June muttered. "We can handle it," said Cash. "Can the horizon?" June prodded, turning her hard brown eyes upon her sister. "When we breach the rings, the pressure of the atmosphere will skyrocket. Do you know what kind of calculations I'm going to have to run to ensure we don't instantly get crushed up like sardines in a can?" "I couldn't do it without you," said Cash, standing and patting June on the shoulder. "Damn straight you couldn't," June snapped back under her breath. Cash left her sister there, mumbling beneath her breath as she plugged away at the star charts and other instruments that kept the horizon flying. Cash wandered back into the center room and crossed her arms. "Y'all ready for liftoff?" "I had a date tonight," Boone whined. "Why don't we ever stick to a schedule?" "What bounty hunter you've ever met that keeps a planner, Boone?" Cash said as she felt the gangplank slide back into the ship with a low rumble. "Besides," Barker teased his twin, "whoever he was, he's better off without the date." "I hate you all," said Boone casually, lighting up a cigarette and standing up slowly from his seat with a stretch. "I'm taking a nap. Let me know when we're there." "You will know," said Tack, ominously. As Boone left for his quarters with a shake of his head, Barker turned to glance at the Jontar. "You ever been to the Arcadia Rim, Tack?" Tack's eyes snapped open again. "Yes." "What's it like?" asked Barker. "Hard to explain," Tack replied simply. "How deep did you go?" "Not far." Tack shrugged her massive shoulders. "Ship explode. Almost." "Good." Barker turned to look at Cash with a strained smile. "Good. That ship didn't have June Guthrie at the helm," Cash pointed out. "That's a lot of stock you're putting into a 19-year-old. "She is mature for her age," Cash shot back. "Get some rest," she ordered. "You're gonna need it." Barker shook his head and turned to leave for his own cabin. Tack had already slipped back into her fugue state. Cash returned to the cockpit, watching through the deep space glass as the horizon pulled away from Station Gamma. "How long will it take for us to reach the rings?" Cash asked as she sat back down next to June. "About 6 hours," said her sister, eyes darting over the screen in front of her. "You need to sleep at some point, kid," Cash pointed out as she set her boots up on the dash and tilted her Stetson down over her eyes. "The autopilot's there for a reason." "Get us to the rim, June. Get some sleep, June. Which one do you want?" All right, Cash waved at her absently. "I ain't your mama." "You sure do act like it," June scoffed, though Cash could hear the hint of a smile in her voice. Cash was lulled into a light sleep by the hum of the engine. June's occasional muttering filtered through her dreams like an odd soundtrack. Her mind's eye danced over fantastical scenarios of chests filled with gold and other precious metals, something like a story her pa might have told her years and years ago. She awoke eventually to a dull beep on the dash of the cockpit as a small indicator light flashed on and off. Beside her, June was curled up in the pilot's chair like a cat, limbs tucked neatly against her stomach. Cash sat up and gazed out through the glass. Outside the horizon, a swath of galactic rings made up of innumerable shattered asteroids, moons, and space dust swirled endlessly around a dark planet sheathed in a thick, cloudy atmosphere. Arcadia, Cash murmured, tilting her hat back on her braids in awe. June asked, raising her head as if she had never been asleep, her eyes groggy and narrowed. Cash tilted her head toward the bow of the ship. June's eyes followed, and as her gaze caught the rings that made up the Arcadia Rim, she sat up slowly in her chair, mouth parted in surprise. "Holy shit," said the younger Guthrie, breathlessly. Cash turned to study her sister's expression. It was one of wild, unhindered excitement, the call to adventure reading on her features like a manifesto. "I'll go wake the others up," said Cash, standing. "Leave you two alone for a minute." June was still so transfixed she did not make what would have surely been a witty retort at the tease. Cash made her way out into the main room and then through it, passing by her cabin and June's to reach Barker's door. She knocked loudly, and the intercom buzzed in response. "What?" asked the man's garbled voice. "Up and at 'em, Barker," she said through the speaker. "Get your brother, too." A deep sigh, and then a "Yes, ma'am," was his reply. In a few minutes, the crew was huddled in the cockpit, every square inch taken up by their bodies as each and every one of them stared out the glass toward their destination. "All right," Cash said after a moment of reverence. "It's time. All hands on deck now." Cash took her seat as co-pilot, as Barker, Boone, and Tack all went off to the various parts of the ship they managed during any given space altercation. Cash once again studied her sister. June's eyes were fixed on the planet below, her gaze steely with determination. "You ready?" Cash asked. June's cheek twitched into a slight smirk. "Hell yeah, I'm ready." With a stiff breath through her nose, June flipped on the ship's intercom and spoke into it. "I need y'all to give me live intel on your readings continuously, you hear?" "Yes," came the chorus of voices over the radio. "All right, let's do this," said June, her hands taking the helm of the ship as she flipped a series of switches. The horizon began to glide forward at mid-speed, the engine kicking its roar up a notch. "Getting around those rings is going to be the easy part," said June, "but it ain't simple." Cash watched the autopilot plot a course through the constantly shifting debris as the horizon approached, reacting more quickly than any human pilot could. June, however, kept her eyes straight ahead, prepared to override any maneuver if necessary. As the ship entered the rings, the turbulence was immediate, smaller pellets of sand and dust washing over them as they passed around more significant pieces of rock, picking up speed with every maneuver. All the while, there was a constant stream of conversation as Barker, Boone, and Tack all called into June with the information coming from their own monitors in the engine room. Cash quietly marveled at June's ability to process all of this information at once and use it to decide every minutia of movement the ship made. The broken-up hull of an escape pod floated by. Cash's gaze slowly followed the empty husk of the dead Califera still strapped inside as the horizon banked below. "We're almost through," June said, her voice sounding surprisingly hopeful. I'm going to take over control of the autopilot now. The atmosphere is too thick for our sensors. Roger, said Boone, as his voice crackled over the intercom. As they left the rings behind, an immediate shift in pressure made Cash's stomach drop and ears pop. June sucked in a loud breath through her teeth. The metal of the ship around them gave a long groan as they passed into the cloudy atmosphere, moving through it like a fog. The lights of the horizon reflected back to them through the haze, catching bits of shattered, unidentifiable detritus. Holy Pete! June yelled, snapping the horizon to one side as a gigantic crushed mass of metal floated toward them from the cloud. I think that was a ship, she said, her voice dying off as the dash began to glitter with alarms. June's face hardened, and Cash lost track of her sister's movements as she, too, began to help collect the information they would need to move forward. We've got pressure building up down here, June, Barker said quickly through the radio. The engine looks fine, but the outer hull panels are struggling to hold consistent power. Gotta go, said June beneath her breath as the horizon began to speed through the ominous space around them. All the while, the metal of the outer hull shifted against the weight of the atmosphere, moaning like a ghost. The crew's voices began to overlap as Cash gripped the handles next to her seat for dear life. June banked them a full 360 degrees around another shipwreck. The hull of the horizon was practically screaming now, a grating, deadly sound that Cash did not think she would ever forget. Boone, I need you to focus on those panels. Keep them fluctuating, June snapped through the intercom. I'm doing my best, woman, the man shouted. We lost one, came Barker's voice as a loud grinding noise ripped away from the ship. June cursed beneath her breath, dipping the nose of the horizon down into a spin. I found a channel that should ease up that pressure a bit, June finally said as the ship righted. Much obliged, shouted one of the twins. Cash took in the information from the front pressure monitor, the dial wavering in the red of danger. The deep space glass in front of them was vibrating now. She had a mental image of a single crack running down its transparent surface, just before she and June were sucked out into the void. How much more of this? Cash asked nervously. As if I would know the answer to that, June snapped back, and then with a quick gasp, she continued. Hold on! Cash let out an unbecoming screech of fear as June flew straight into a hull that had been ripped in twain, passing the horizon through a gap in the ship barely wide enough to fit them. June, came Tack's low warning growl through the radio. Hold on, June said again. There was a small drop of pressure as the fog of the atmosphere around them thinned, the horizon spinning wildly through a gap in debris, like a coin dropped into a well. Cash and June yelled in unison as they both took control of the ship's steering. With a jerk, the horizon stopped its twirling. We're still in the atmosphere, June remarked in surprise, her hands flying across the touchscreen before her. How is that possible? Where's the planet? June, Cash tried to interrupt as her sister babbled. These readings don't make any sense. We're still under immense pressure, but it's so stable, the ship isn't having to compete with it. June! Cash grabbed her sister's face and lifted it upward, forcing her to look out the front of the ship. June's voice cut off, and her face paled in surprise. Cash took in the scene as a sense of awe overtook them both. Hovering against a backdrop of dark, foggy atmosphere, the rings still shedding an ethereal glow over it all, was something Cash could not quite identify initially. Are those? June's voice drifted away in confusion. Cities. Cash finished the thought automatically. Floating cities. The rest of the crew shuffled in, each just as dumbstruck as the two Guthries. Well, folks, Cash said as she fished a cigar from her pocket and flicked open her lighter. Welcome to the Arcadia Rim.
A huge shout out to my patrons, without whom I could not be doing this. Danielle, Fox, Lisa, Erica, Rain, Bonnie, Mara, Rachel, AB, Robert, Claire, Susasaurus, Matthew, Taysom, Vicky, Michael, Willow, Jill, Orsoya, Frenchon, Fritz, Rodney, Andrew, Megan, Kira, Camille, Emily, Andy, and Kat. And as always, thanks for listening.
That's a lot of stock you're putting.
That's a lot of stock you're putting.
That's a lot of stock you're putting in there all there, guys.